Hello everyone. Today in this particular paper of ecology, we are going to talk about habitat and niche. It is of great importance to know that human habitats evoke temporal and spatial behaviors that help in the shaping of its social environments and are also patterned by personality, culture, age, gender, socio-economic status and experience. Similarly is with plants. Plants are also characterized on the basis of these into aquatic plants, xerophytic plants, epiphytes and terrestrial. So, in this module the learning objectives will be to understand the concept of habitat, niche, biotic and abiotic factors affecting them, the place of habitation and the effect of competitors on niche overlappings. We will begin this module with the concept of habitat. Habitat refers to the places where the organism can be found, such as aquatic, terrestrial, nesting places, extent of habitats and territories occupied. Explanation can be made in a simple ways such as a place where person is living, physical layouts of urban and rural communities, organizations such as physical settings of schools, workplaces, hospitals, social agencies, shopping areas and religious structures and parks and other amenities. For plants, it could be aquatic, terrestrial or epiphytic. Normally, two organisms can live in the same habitat. Their coexistence can be explained by the non-limiting abundance of resources required for their living. Talking about the niche, niche refers to the status occupied by an individual or family in the structure of a community. For example, habitat of hydrilla is aquatic and its niche is submerged. The niche concept is more common in animals than plants. Plants require same basic nutrients for their growth, while animals feed on various type of food and it varies from animal to animal, that is known as food niche. To model the niche mechanism, it is necessary to understand the way an organism's morphology, physiology and spatially behavior or response in utilizing resources determine the kinds of environment it experiences when living in a particular habitat. And it is also necessary to understand how those environmental conditions affect fitness, that is the growth, survival and reproduction of that organism. Concept of niche. About 90 years ago, Joseph Grinnell proposed ideas about distributional area of species. He described the distinct roles of various types of environmental factors acting at different scales. At a later time, Hutchinson developed seminal concepts about ecological niches and their relation with areas of distribution of a species. Niche concept of Hutchinson and Grinnell focus on the response of organism to abiotic and biotic factors. In the year 1927, Elton mentioned a different niche concept that describes the functional role of an organism in its environment. His concept considers the environmental impacts of the organism as a result of its consuming and being consumed. That is, an organism can be acting as a predator or become a prey to another organism. Leibold in 1995 proposed a synthesis of these two approaches by including both the impacts and requirements of a species in the definition of its niche. Organisms try to modify the level of various niche factors through their impacts. These modified levels of niche factors in turn determine the response of organisms. This reciprocal interaction reveals the feedback between organism and their environment. One view looks niche as the joint listing of requirements of resources that permit growth rate of a population together with its impacts. The other view observes niche as a subset of environmental conditions under which populations of a species have positive growth rates. These environmental definitions mostly characterize climatic or other physical factors. Specific factors are important to clarify niche of a species in relation to areas of distribution. In the first place, niche as habitat, that is physical area of existence, must be distinguished from niche as function, that is the interactive areas of existence. We will talk about the place of habitation, abiotic and biotic factors. The distributional area of a species cannot be easily distinguished as it is influenced by diverse factors operating at different scales. The factors are abiotic and biotic, area available for species to expand its territory, availability of the species to evolve. These factors continuously interact with different strengths and scales to produce a geographical entity for the species. This entity dynamically varies. The abiotic factors include all aspects of physical environment in which the species is living and their influence on the metabolic activities of the species. All kinds of interactions, that is positive, negative and neutral, the species has with the other organisms in the habitat explains the role of biotic factors. Grinnell included all of the commonly listed environmental limiting factors in his formal descriptions of species niche. These included microhabitats, abiotic factors, resources and predators, and he emphasized the combination of physiological and behavioral adaptations that allow species to respond to such factors. In a hypothetical functional niche of a species, the intrinsic population growth rate would be positive for a set of combination of variables such as growth rate at low densities and minimal negative interactors. This is nearly same to Hutchinson's functional niche, which with few caveats. The potential niche is normally a part of functional niche of a species that actually exists at a specified geographical region at a given time. Potential niche mostly is smaller than functional niche of a species. The realized niche is a part of the potential niche that the species would actually use after the effects of competitors and predators are taken into account. Biotic, abiotic and movements have an impact on the niche of a species. Underlying the abstractions are observations of the temporal and spatial patterns in which individuals, organisms are distributed over the planet. Three important groups of such factors are: number 1, the dispersal capacities of the species, whether by their own movement or by propagule dispersal by external agents. Number 2, the spatial distribution of environmental conditions favorable to the established survivalship and reproduction by the individuals. And number 3, the biotic environment constituted by the species competitors, predators and pathogens together with the availability and dynamics of resources. These discussions focus largely on distinguishing between habitat and functional aspects of the niche and on the importance given to the relation of different species, niches of each other. In the discussion below, we will focus instead on the distinction between environmental requirements and environmental impacts of species to highlight the dichotomy between responses of organisms to the environment and their effects upon it. This picture clearly shows various habitats such as aquatic, semi-aquatic and terrestrial. This indicates that plants and animals are adapted for their nutrients and water requirements and association of species. In this slide, different populations and their niches across the forest ecosystem are shown. The forest structure is created by living trees. The tree provides food and shelter for many animals of the forest such as insects, small mammals and birds. Each tree in the forest can be considered an individual ecosystem. Next, we can see that life in the forest is also related to neighboring ecosystems. The connection takes place by way of air currents, water and roaming animals. Birds can gather food from different ecosystems. Many animals feed on different type of food, thus assuring their survival under unfavorable conditions. When animals and plants live together in specific physical environment, they create an ecosystem. A certain type of forest will be formed according to the type of animal and plant life present in it. Talking about the niche width, identifying the niche width and overlap of a species depend on the distribution of species across resource availability. A species that can live on diverse resources normally will have a wider width. In natural systems, organisms prefer to have smaller realized width as this ensures better resource within a small area. Niche overlap is the collective utilization of resources by two or more species in the same region. Overlap brings in interspecific competition. Organisms constantly try to minimize competition in sharing resources either by temporal or spatial variation. Niche width is the distance through a niche along some particular line in niche space. Niche overlap is simply the joint use of a resource or resources by two or more species. The measure of niche width and overlap are based on the distribution of individual organisms by species within a set of resource states. The table formed by using species as rows and resources states as columns will be called the resource matrix. In this slide, the resource utilization when a niche overlaps is shown. When competition is asymmetric and niches do not overlap completely, weaker competitors use non-overlapping resources, as we can see in this picture. In this slide, we can see the different vegetation niche. This particular slide shows the niche overlap and different communities interactions. The slide shows the niche possessed by same community. Now we will talk about resource availability and partitioning. Establishment, growth and continuity of a species is influenced by resource availability and partitioning. At higher resource availability, growth of a species would be in all aspects, that is, more leaves, robust shoot and root system. Organisms have to compromise in their growth potential as resource availability such as light, nutrients is not uniform. This makes them to go for partitioning of biomass, variations in phenological cycle. The niche width of a species in the resource matrix can be estimated by measuring the uniformity of the distribution of individuals of that species among the resource states of the matrix. In this slide, we can see the niche overlap. we can see the disjunct, that is when two niches are present, then the equal overlap, unequal overlap, and when the niche are included in one or the other. This slide shows us the effect of competition and how the variation in different niche breadth takes place. Niche breadth and overlap when measured under natural conditions are actual matrices, while virtual niche breadth and overlap are the corresponding values measured in the absence of competition among species. Levins in 1968 refers to the virtual niche as pre-competitive. Most commonly, competitive displacement or exclusion tends to reduce niche breadth and overlap among competing species, so that the actual niche is a proper subset of the virtual niche in environmental space. To summarize this module, we can say that habitat is actually the place where an organism can be found, and niche is the status of that organism in that habitat. This module is of utmost importance because in order to conserve nature, to protect nature, it is very important to understand the habitat and niche of all the organisms. Thank you.